Oh, baby, the Golden Stallion is here, is ready to get into a little Patreon Wednesday Q&A. And I'm going to try to get to more than just 2 questions this week because I feel like the past couple weeks or maybe even month, all I've been able to get to are just a couple questions at a shot, and we go for like an hour, sometimes a little more. I think it'd be fun to get into. I mean, I have quite a few more. It'd be fun to get into a few more and vary up the topics a bit. We'll start off with maybe a couple of tech questions, and then we'll get into a bit of history, and then maybe a little bit of fun at the end. So, and as always, thank you so much to the patrons. You make Sovereign Tech really go round and round, along with our sponsors, of course, but thank you so much. I know we got some new patrons in the past week or so welcome to you. And, of course, if you want to send in questions for the Sovereign Tech Q&A, you can either message me privately right on Patreon, which is one of the best ways to make sure that your question gets answered. You could also use, I suppose you could use the Sovereign Tech Facebook group. You could use the Reddit or the subreddit, the Sovereign Tech, r/sub, or what should I call it? R Sovereign Tech. Is that what I should call it? R Sovereign Tech, or, there's Twitter. Sometimes people ask me questions through Twitter. A lot of options out there for you. So anyway, let's get into our first question here. And the first question goes a little something like this. For Q&A, I'd be interested in your opinion on refurbished desktop computers. My current computer was refurbished and has been okay, but even when I got it, its specs weren't great. And now it's several years old and can't handle things like Firefox Quantum or too many open browser tabs. I'm looking to upgrade, and I see tons of refurbished computers at decent prices, so I'm thinking about getting another one, but I thought I'd ask Savzu's opinion first. So Savzu is here for you. Great question, actually. This is something, believe it or not, there's quite a bit of debate around this. And I think the debate is a little foolish. And I'll explain more on this. I'm not talking about the listener. The listener's asking a completely valid question. I'm saying the people that have this debate, I think, are kind of out there. Well, anyway, so refurbished computers, just straight up, I think they're fine. I think they're great. I buy them regularly. Really. In fact, it's the only way you can get, if you want LibreBoot computers and all that, most of those are, for all intents and purposes, refurbs. They're refurbished X200s, T400s, T400Ss or T500s, whatever. They're all refurb computers from years ago, but it's the only way. They're the only computers you could buy, really, at least at the moment, where you could, really dig deep and actually install LibreBoot and use LibreBoot. So you have a choice. If you want the ultimate in control over your hardware, you are buying look, I have no problem with purism really, but to get really nitty gritty and to really know and really have that control, something with, say like the Free Software Foundation's Respect Your Freedom certification, blah, blah, blah. If you put into that, you have to buy refurbed. You don't have a choice. That's it. Unless you've had a computer for years that fits that bill, because it has to be, I think it's Sandy Bridge, not pre-Sandy Bridge, but anything Sandy Bridge and below that you can do that with. I know as far as LibreBoot goes, and that's not what this person's asking. I'll get into, broader aspects here in a second. But the AMD's processors, their Ryzen processors, those are, can theoretically handle LibreBoot, and supposedly that's something being worked on. Great. But again, that's the point, is that really, if you want to do, kind of your quote unquote anti-NSA computing, if that's even possible, if you want to do that right, you're buying a refurb. Now, the argument goes for why not to buy refurbed generally isn't because you're getting something of lesser quality and you don't know how great the refurbishing was and blah, blah, blah. Usually that's not what people are concerned about when it comes to, hey, should I get a refurb or not? Usually it comes down to, is literally, this is the thing, and this is what I think is kind of ridiculous, is the NSA putting in their own hardware, is the CIA confiscating it and putting some kind of, key logger or something on this refurb computer, blah, blah, blah. That's generally where, your privacy, quote unquote, and I put that in some serious quotes, privacy experts, that they get concerned about. Now, look, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that that's not possible. Both are probably absolutely true. However, you don't need refurbished computers for the NSA to do that to you, right? They can do it. We talked about it. This was a story, maybe a year or two ago, maybe even 3 years ago, where it was found that, yeah, the NSA was literally, I think it was in the Snowden revelations where the NSA was intercepting packages and injecting either software or some kind of hardware or whatever else into targets' computers, into computers that targets were purchasing. So sure, they do that, but they don't need to do that to refurb's not like a guarantee that that's happening, nor is buying a new computer a guarantee that it's not. Like, it's really foolish. I think that argument. So anyway, I think maybe on the broader spectrum for, people that aren't so, shall we say, tech savvy, yeah, I think it becomes a question of, well, it's a refurb. It might not last you as long. You want to buy new when you can buy new. It's kind of like the used car argument. You don't want to buy a used car. I disagree all the way across the board. I think refurbs, like I said, I think refurbs are great. There's a lot of companies who actually, there's one company in particular called CyberPower, which they put out for very reasonable prices some very, very powerful computers. Okay. Desktop, laptop, whatever. I mean, and it's debatable, they're not Dell, they're not HP. They're really not making their own computers. Okay. They are using more generic, even though they can look very badass. They're using more generic parts. Some could even argue that the way that they get their price down so far is from actually using refurbished parts, or something along the lines of refurbished parts, maybe like somewhat rejected, parts because they have some kind of like cosmetic issue or something like that. It's pretty remarkable, how cheap CyberPower can sell very powerful computers. And, I've had Sovereign Tech listeners. I've run CyberPower machines before. I've had Sovereign Tech listeners that run CyberPower machines. And, it's largely a great experience. I mean, the only funny thing with CyberPower machines, sometimes on their laptops, like their power supplies is very weird. Talk about a generic part. It's a very weird thing. But regardless, great company for what the service that they're providing. Honestly, a lot of people that have Apple computers, if they have any Apple computer that is remotely new and the person is young, usually they bought a refurb from Apple. Now, people feel a little bit differently about Apple refurbs because, they think that Apple is some kind of guarantee of quality. Obviously, we know that's far from the truth. Yes, Apple makes great computers that last a lifetime. I understand that. Okay, but they have no claim to somehow doing refurbs better than any other company. And they also don't have like a claim to being as customer centric, especially when it comes to laptops, or as consumer facing, I guess I should say, as any other company is. Like it's kind of a crazy argument. Yep, their computers do last forever, but that is one statement that does not in reality imply much else. Okay, so you can buy. I mean, it might be a little bit, admittedly, it might be a little better if you can buy like a refurbed Dell or a refurbed HP directly from Dell or HP. Yeah, you might be able to feel a little more comfortable about that. I've worked a technician's bench that was doing refurbishing. I will tell you, me personally, granted, who I was may not be representative of everybody else, but I made sure, like, I put as many new parts as I could into a refurb, and like I went the distance, to make sure that what was going out there was incredibly new. And for me, as a technician that was doing refurbs, like, it mattered to me because, well, A, it's what I would have wanted, and B, I mean, I wanted my work to look that good, and I love the idea of computers lasting so long. I can't believe I'm the only person, in the past or to today, I'm the only technician that feels that way. Like, it was really, really important to me, that these things had, like, I mean, if it had like a certain model, say of hard drive or something like that, I would chuck it, even if it passed all the tests. I'd be like, no. Let's put a Maxter in there. Let's make it right. So, I mean, even at least in my own experience, granted, I can't say how every company does refurbs. Okay. But in my own experience, like, my manager, all he cared about was that, the machines were getting out, everything was getting out there, and everything was on time. There weren't a ton of returns, or anything like that. That's all he cared about. I had pretty much free reign to do what I ever wanted to do, and use whatever parts are necessary, whatever, for these refurbs, these full-on desktops and everything, and others, as well as point-of-sale systems. Like, they didn't care. They just, as long as, and that's my point, is that you could say, like, this is one, in my opinion, the refurb process and the repair process is one of the areas where, like the technician at that low level, the person who is, shall we say, maybe a little more understanding of, they're not like some white collar, not that there's anything wrong necessarily with being white collar, but, someone that could really understand where you're coming from, and, understands the need to buy, a less expensive computer and all this stuff, that person really does have the free reign to make sure you're getting a really quality product. Again, I know not everybody's going to be that way, but there was at least one back in the day, and that was me. I'm talking almost 10 years ago, but still, I think those people are out there, and I think refurbs are fine. I buy refurbs whenever I can. I buy refurbs to some degree because, for ecological reasons. Dead serious about that. I get it. I know. Environmentalism's a religion. It's an ugly cult. I understand that. Okay. But, ecology is a very real thing. And, I don't like, it's like the old, I bring this up all the time when people talk about, when I get into arguments with people saying, oh yeah, I just bought this Prius, and I really care. I don't want to be using so much oil. I care about this, blah, blah, blah. And I always say to them, I'm like, if you really gave a shit about the environment, you'd buy every used car you could find and you'd drive it till you drove it into the ground. You're full of crap if you're, claiming that you're saving the environment or you're doing this. You're doing nothing about waste. You don't know. Boy, it just drives me nuts. Anyway, that's not a conversation I want to get down, or, a rabbit hole I want to go down. But point being, I like buying refurbs. Honestly, it does make me feel good that, okay, well, this one didn't go to waste. Or when it does go to waste, it's going to be because I fucking wasted it. I used it until it was dead. And, I'm a big believer in that, in that sort of thing. So yeah, I love refurbs. I love getting the discount. I generally I can barely remember any issues really ever with refurb. I know there's horror stories out there, and they happen, and even like I said, when I was a technician and I was doing refurbs, there was times where a machine would come back and the technician misses something. Well, it happens. It doesn't mean that they're nefarious or that they're greedy bastards or something like that. I wasn't being a greedy bastard. I was just, I did my absolute best, and then there ended up being, who knows, maybe a stick of RAM went bad on the way there, or, whatever the hell happened. So it happened. So yeah, I have, again, no problem with refurbs whatsoever. And, if you can buy direct from manufacturer, I think that's a good idea, but that's not a requirement, whatsoever. Like Newegg will do actual refurbs, and they do them themselves, and they do a hell of a job. Newegg is really always trying to be, on the up and up. They're trying to take on Amazon. They're not going to win. They're not in a very serious way are they going to actually beat out Amazon. But they're trying, and they're trying to do the best work that they can with it. So I don't have any problem with what they're doing. Amazon's refurb process, I don't know much about it, but I think anytime I've ever really had an issue, it's when Amazon was selling it directly, say from their warehouse deals or something. The only advantage is with Amazon, look, if the product you get is shit, you can send it right back, relatively no questions asked, and then you can get another one. So, that's the advantage of Amazon, but I'm not saying that they do great refurb work in any, in any way. So hopefully that answers that question. Very simple. It's an important question to ask. I do not agree with any of the arguments against refurbs. I think they're either ridiculous or just, they're not very well founded, and they're they come from an ideology from 20, 30 years ago, where used products and a lot of this other stuff. Maybe there really was a problem at the time. Or more accurately, people were more economically well off and buying new was actually possible as to where, That's not always true today. So anyway, there we go. That should answer that question. Let's move on to another one here. So, and this is another tech question. Let's see. During a Prime episode, I think you mentioned having hard switches versus soft switches. Thoughts on the theory that you can't trust the hard switches, i.e. just because you turn it off doesn't mean it's actually off, and there's a secret battery in your phone that is always on even if you remove the main battery. Okay, another great question to ask about this, and this is something I've brought up many times. In fact, I have a saying which is to the effect of the world is perishing, at the loss of one hardware switch at a time. Meaning that as we get rid of hardware switches, like the less control you actually have over the world around you in a very real sense. And this isn't just for computers. This is true for televisions. This is true for, all kinds of devices that you can think of. And, me personally, granted, I know I have the bias, because I've been around a little while, 36 years old. And it's not a long time, but it's a little while. And my first computer, like that was mine, that was for me to use. Okay. It was a 386SX. And this would have been the early 90s. We had computers all the time, but one, like I said, one was specifically for me to mess with, and I could do whatever I want to it, install whatever I want on it, write whatever I want on it, blah, blah, blah. In fact, Windows 3.1 in a heartbeat, had Star Trek 25th Anniversary installed on that baby in no time, turn on the high mem, the whole thing. Okay, play a little Duke Nukem 2, not even 3D, Duke Nukem 2. So that computer, the case that it was in, was back in the days when towers weren't a thing. It was literally where the term desktop, comes from, where it almost covered the entirety of the top of your desk. And if you had a smaller desk, you had to put your monitor on top of the desktop. And at the time, obviously computer, monitors were huge, these giant CRT things, even though the screen, you'd be lucky if it was 15 inches. And that's even pushing it. And the case would have to handle the weight of one of those giant glass tube monitors, right? So anyway, the power switch, I'll never forget. I'll never forget that computer in the first place. I still have pictures of it. But like the power button on it wasn't even a button. It was on the right-hand side of it. You had to reach around, kind of to the, not to the back of it, but, towards the back of it on the right-hand side. It was this massive, and I mean massive, red switch that made such a satisfying clunk when you would turn it on or off. You knew. Clunk. It was either on or it was off. It was fucking awesome. I missed that huge red switch, baby. Oh, anyway, seriously, it was great, and boy, every time I'd turn it on, the world was my oyster. But anyway, so, that's an example of a classic hardware switch. And I have that bias to where that brings fond memories to my mind. I understand that. But it's more than a bias, okay, because you don't, and there's two parts to that question that I'll get to. And that is my complaint over software switches. And the soft switch is like when you're on your phone and you want to turn off your Bluetooth, you scroll down the settings at the top, and then you just press the little button that's on the touchscreen itself. It's not a physical button that turns off the Bluetooth. So the debate goes, and the problem goes, that, well, you don't really know that the Bluetooth's off, right? Sure, the OS says it is, but maybe it's still running. And this has been a problem as late. There have been varying, what was it? Was it Blueborn? Was that the name of the exploit against Bluetooth? Where you found out that, sure, you could turn Bluetooth off, but then even the OS would turn it back on at 5 a.m. every day. And that's a concern when, you're concerned about a Bluetooth exploit against your device or whatever. So you don't really know that it's ever off, and obviously the operating system could always turn it back on. And of course, then the question becomes, well, who controls the operating system, and could this be turned back on remotely? Of course it could. Getting down what 10 years ago would have been called paranoia, today is a fact. Really, it's just a fact. Deal with it. And you can say that you don't want to worry about it and you just go on living your life and you don't want to go bake your own silicon in your backyard with your own sand and all that shit. Yeah, I get it. Okay. But, these aren't zero-sum games. It's not like, getting hardware switches means that you don't get to use Google Docs or something. I mean, that's preposterous. Or saying that, arguing for anything other than what Google and Apple want to ram down your throat is somehow, like I say all the time now, is somehow going back to the Amish. That's so stupid. Okay. There are middle grounds. There are not compromises, but, things that could be done that are not hard to implement, that would be very helpful. One of those things is hardware switches. Now, what the argument or the concern, what about the person brought up said, what about the argument that really even with a hardware switch, you don't know what's happening? Well, then that's not a hardware switch done right. Like, yes, there could be hardware switches like on laptops, as hardware switches were starting to go away and laptops are getting thinner and smaller and all this stuff. What happened? So for an example, okay. So you had ThinkPads, say back in the 90s, right? Now, they would have or the late 90s or whatever, early aughts even. They would have, back when Wi-Fi was becoming a thing, they would have a physical Wi-Fi cutoff switch on it. Okay, there would be, on the side of the laptop where you flick a switch. You don't just flick it, you move it, and then Wi-Fi would be off. Now, here's the thing. At the time, that switch, that little switch that you would pull on, literally created a cutoff. Like between the wires. Like there was a literal cutoff. It wasn't just a command that it sent. It was an absolute cutoff. That Wi-Fi was off. And there was no way, unless you flick the switch back, there was no fucking way it was turning back on. Okay, now, a guy that I don't like to mention, but John McAfee, he, was touting his kind of privacy phone that has actual hardware switches and all this stuff on it. Now, I don't know the specs of his phone, but he was talking about how, this is going to be private because you're going to have control over the radios. And he showed on the back, it had like 5 hardware switches. I would hope that when he was implementing these hardware switches onto this phone that he wants to put out there, the secure, quote unquote, secure phone, that those would be like when you turn off the Bluetooth, that it's literally putting a cutoff between the Bluetooth wires or whatever else, or it's doing some kind of cutoff to keep it from reaching to the antenna. Okay. It's tough when you have, SoC, when it's system on a chip and everything's baked into one little thing, but you still have to connect it to the antenna. I mean, that's why, a lot of phones have the bezels and everything, because they actually function as the antenna for the device. And if you cut it off from the antenna, I mean, like that's the thing. It's all bullshit if it's not physically cutting off the radio. Okay, the Bluetooth radio, the Wi-Fi radio, whatever radio it ends up happening to be. And maybe he's not doing that. I don't know. But that's when I say that we need hardware switches, that's what I mean. When you're literally closing the circuit. Like it's not a command that's being sent just by a fancy dancy little switch. It's literally cutting it off. Okay, you're literally closing the circuit or opening, what I mean. So yeah, I mean, because otherwise, right, sure, you don't know. If the hardware switch is just there as representative, then there's no reason for it really not to be a soft switch, because it's effectively a soft switch in physical form. So I could believe that, that kind of thing goes on. I know that kind of thing goes on. So, but when I say a hard switch or a hardware switch, again, like I said, I mean literally cutting it the fuck off. And, like whatever it is, putting the bit between the wire that makes sure that there's no connection, whatever it takes, that's what I mean by that. So, and yeah, I mean, to do a lot of that stuff, sure, you can't have a thin and light laptop. Well, how's it go? Have hardware switches, have thin and light, pick one. Well, I'll take the hardware switches, thank you, because that just represents actually having control of my device, privacy, etc. So, okay, now to the second part. What about if there's a secret battery in the phone that even when you turn the phone off, keeps certain things running? Okay. There is verifiably a half-truth to this. Now, one of the things, and I don't remember when this was first ever discussed broadly, one of the things that people recommend, hey, if you actually want some privacy, and you have a smartphone, you're going to power down the smartphone, take the battery out, and that way or quote unquote, that way all right, this is the theory, that way that nothing's listening. The device is powered down. You can't be tracked on GPS. Like if you're running away, and you need to use your phone sporadically, you're on the run, you would take out the battery, and then as you need it, put it back in, then take it back out. And that way the government can't track you on GPS, blah, 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 all that whole kind of scenario. Now the argument that there's somehow a secret battery in there is there's not really a secret battery per se, but I guess the half-truth in it is that, in my opinion, this is one of the larger reasons why you're not allowed to remove your battery. You can take these devices apart. If there's some kind of secret battery there, it is very well camouflaged. And there's whole companies like iFixit, that's the name of the company, iFixit, where they do full teardowns. Now, either they're on the CIA or NSA's take or what, I don't know. Okay. But I would think that they would have found one, and I've taken apart phones. I mean, I've thrashed devices, and if there's some kind of battery there, I don't see it, like it has to be some kind of completely unknown, not alien as in from another planet, but I mean, practically like alien technology that just no one's ever talked about or discussed. It's tough also. I mean, now you're running into the area where, like with a lot of laptops particularly, and I think this is happening with some phone models now too, it'll become more popular down the line, I'm sure, where the batteries, you're literally pouring the battery into the device. To allow for that thinness, you can't have a traditional battery slot or, battery put into it, or particularly that you can remove. To get that thinness, you're like I say, you're literally pouring a battery into, where it's taking up every nook and cranny that's free inside the chassis of your laptop or, your smartphone even. So, I mean, you can't, this goes back to the hardware switches. What do you want? Do you want a removable battery or do you want something that's thin and light? You really can't have both. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess, like I say, kind of the half truth is that the battery, sure, this is possible, but I mean, like it's the nature of the beast now. It doesn't need to be a secret battery. You can't remove the battery. Like you physically cannot possibly remove the battery. You could pull the line to it, I guess, but yeah, it's such a crazy bit of business. I don't think that there's a secret battery. If there is, they've done such an amazing job of camouflaging it that, wow, like no one would ever know. And I've never heard anybody come out and say, okay, I mean, because you would think it'd be easy to prove. You could just say, well, all right, this transistor or, this capacitor or whatever here, it's actually not a capacitor, it's a battery. And you'd be able to prove that. Like, I mean, there's a certain way that a battery has to be put onto a board that you'd know, that it was doing that. That's why I say if it is otherwise, and you just can't know, then it is some like totally new way of doing electronics. That's why I use the term alien, that we just never, we've never been aware of. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible. Most things are, but I don't think that that's been done. I don't think that that's been a thing. And I will say that, that removable battery trick, I'm not going to go into details about this, but that removable battery trick is done by, it's done by government agents as much as it would be done by criminals. That's what I'll say about that, as much as it can be done. I mean, it's interesting. One thing, and I've never really gotten a great answer on this, is like Israel, the IDF, which I've done. In the past I had done work, we'll say, with the IDF. They buy like a lot of computer products, whatever else. Like they buy iPads, they buy all this kind of shit, right? And they do a lot of custom tinkering. Like they take those things apart in a heartbeat. And there's shit that they're drilling out of these things. I mean, like it's really, really, it's fascinating to watch what they're doing. And not that you know exactly what they're doing, but it's fascinating that they even do it. And that does make you wonder. Like when you find out about those sorts of things, it's like, okay, what did they feel like they needed to do? What are they adding in? What are they taking out? Like what's the concern here? And yeah, I mean, you can certainly understand, not that military should exist, but you can certainly understand where, a military would want to lock stuff down and secure things and everything. But what are they doing with that? And it's a big question. And that makes you wonder, is there something secret there that they know that they pull out of it? Sure. I don't think that that's a battery, but it's probably something. I mean, anyway, it's just an interesting factoid, that's, they do it. They do it. And I will just say, I mean, this is the importance of companies like iFixit and others that do teardowns, or like these guys on YouTube that do full teardowns and everything. I mean, while we still can, because it's really getting to the point where you can't, or I mean, you can, but not without damaging the device, or, it's certainly not for the layman, which I think there was a point where it really was. But I mean, that's the importance of these guys. These guys do tremendous work. If you ever want to frequent them, do so, because, when they give a bad score that something's difficult to take apart, that's important. I mean, you can say, yeah, but I do want that thin and light computer, and you make the trade-off. That's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I have a thin and light. I mean, I have my ZenBook 3. It's literally the thinnest computer in the world. Okay, you can accept that, but just understand what the trade-offs are. Be aware of these sorts of things. And I think iFixit brings up a lot of valid points, including genuine ecological ones. I think it points to that are fascinating to consider. So again, not environmentalism. Relax. Okay, we actually, oh, this is such a huge subject. Look, really, you do want efficient devices. I get it. Nobody's arguing for carbon footprints or any of this other horse shit. Okay, but you really do want devices that, by conventional metrics, would be considered good for the environment. Okay, I mean, there's all kinds of problems. I get it. Recycled toilet paper is, filled with dyes and all these dangerous chemicals. I get all that. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that the abstract notion is somehow wrong. Okay, the abstract notion of doing things that are good for the environment, that are sustainable, etc. It's not. It's not wrong at all. That's called ecology. It's an actual fucking science. Environmentalism's a cult. All right. And like the shit that Al Gore does, I mean, that's all a cult. That's all bullshit. Okay. But actual ecology that's been studied for over 100 years, one could argue for thousands, but, well over traditionally for over 100 years. I mean, that's fully fucking legit. People got to, oh man, libertarians and, kind of more right leaning folk and all that of different stripes. I swear, if anything's just like perceived as left, they just completely write it off. And also conversely, and equally sadly, just because something is against the left, they consider it an ally. And both of those statements, in my opinion, are positively dangerous. Both of those stances are absolutely dangerous and really, can be harmful to so many. There's points that the left and right make that are completely valid. And just because one is the enemy of the other, I mean, I get it. I know the old, Sun Tzu quote, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, the enemy of your enemy is your fucking enemy, motherfucker. Like, let's not be stupid here. Okay. Just because the alt-right likes the left doesn't mean that the alt-right is a good thing if you are so against the left. It's very strange, very, very strange. The seemingly the widespread acceptance of anything that's the right as being okay, but if it just remotely kisses the left or something like that, oh, it's evil. Without even bothering to look into the reality of the statement. Very, very odd. So anyway, and I'm not saying that's true for everybody. It just does seem to be a very popular stance, and you're welcome to say that it's not, but I think it is. Seriously, like how many libertarians, you see so many libertarians and a lot of these types they have no problem going to some kind of like conservative, I don't know, they'll go to CPAC, they'll go to some kind of stuff. Will they ever go to anything that's like loaded with Democrats? Almost never, which is a pity, because I think amazing work could be done in those kind of environments. I really do. Granted, you got to actually have some empathy and some understanding, and you can't walk in there with, God bless America and all that crap. And I know that might be hard for some people, but I think amazing things could be done, in those routes and avenues. So, all right, let's get on to another question. This one, it's really long. So I distilled it down to about 2 sentences, and I'll try and address everything that gets brought up in it. But I mean, this is a very lengthy email. And the question was about me, saying that at one point I was a Seventh-day Adventist. Yes, this is absolutely true. And then pretty much the bulk of the question is what's the deal with Seventh-day Adventism? How is this any different from any other Christianity? Blah, blah, blah. I don't know why you can't just go to Google, but I'll answer your questions. Some of it got into kind of conspiratorial realms, which I think is interesting. And maybe that's why you didn't just go to Google. But I mean, I'll say this, Seventh-day Adventism is not any kind of conspiracy. I think it is a religion. It is a denomination of Christianity that lends itself to getting people into a very conspiratorial mindset, in my opinion, meaning that Seventh-day Adventists think that the whole world is against them, more particularly the entire universe outside of Christ, of course. But Seventh-day Adventism, it's just a Christian denomination. That's really all it is. Okay. It is one that's been around for a while. It is particularly American, but interestingly, a lot of people don't know this. Most of the Christian missionaries and the bulk of the Christian missionary work around the world, maybe outside of Catholicism, is in Protestantism is done by Adventists, and I mean, they even beat the Mormons as far as how much that they do. They're not as annoying as well. And please, I know I have Mormon listeners. I'm not knocking you, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, they're not as annoying about it or as uniform about it as Mormons are or as Jehovah's Witnesses are. So I don't think they get as much recognition for the amount of missionary and outreach work that they do. And I think that's why a lot of people don't realize how many people are Seventh-day Adventists. Like Ben Carson, the guy that goof that ran for, anybody that runs for politics is kind of a goof, but that was he running for presidency, right? I mean, he was a Seventh-day, or he is a Seventh-day Adventist. That might have been one of the first times that anybody had ever heard of one. You have that famous memorial statue of Iwo Jima, right, with the military, World War II, or whatever. That was the main guy holding up the flag in that. There's a few guys, flags of our fathers, all that shit. The main guy holding that up was the Seventh-day Adventist. I mean, it's not like they're not people that have been around and there aren't effectively famous ones. There's quite a few. So anyway, what is Adventism? What is Seventh-day Adventism? And just some brief thoughts on it. This is something that came out of, again, a particularly American movement in what's called the Millerite movement, which is part of the Second Great Awakening, which is like this claim that there was this, all new understanding of what was really being said in the Bible. And this was all happening within, the middle of the 19th century. Okay. And ironically, in upstate New York, I've brought this point up many times. It's interesting that Mormonism and the Millerite movement, or what would end up being, Seventh-day Adventism, both started in upstate New York at about the same time, like within just maybe a few years of each other, if that. It's kind of strange that any religion is a cult. In my opinion, it just is. If I were a Christian, I would, in fact, there's a great book by great if you're a Christian. But it's interesting all the same, even if you're not a Christian. It's a very interesting read by Dr. Walter Martin called Kingdom of the Cults. And it is all about these different kind of odder sects of Christianity. And he calls out Mormonism, he even calls out Catholicism as being a cult. He's obviously like some kind of Southern Baptist or something like that. I think that's what Walter Martin was. But he, in the first appendix of that book, he makes it very clear that no, Seventh-day Adventists are not a cult at all. They're totally in line with Protestant Christianity. Yeah, they do a couple weird things, but there's nothing there that stands against, like, they don't really stand against sola scriptura, which is sola scriptura is the biblical, or is the, not the biblical, but the Christian concept of a scripture alone is where you get doctrine. Okay. And as to where in Catholicism, it's not just scripture alone. Okay. It's not sola scriptura. It's what the church, what the College of Cardinals, what the Pope, whoever else, whatever they say goes. Now, people get confused with this as far as Seventh-day Adventists claiming that they don't actually follow sola scriptura. Just real quick, the other thing that Walter Martin said was very clear, a clear teaching that a Christian denomination had to believe in to understand, or to be in line with the true faith of Christ, is that they had to believe in the Trinity, which there was a time where Adventism did not. This is true. There was a time where what they call Arianism, or Arianism. I always said Arianism just to not get it confused with the Arians. But Arianism is this concept that Jesus was like kind of a later creation. The Trinity is the idea that you have the Holy Spirit. God, or you have God the Son, God the Father, God the Spirit, right? You have Jesus, you have Big Daddy God, and you have the Holy Spirit, and those three are actually one. Like they're one being, which I don't want to get lost on talking about that. Bottom line being is that Adventists are totally on board with the Trinity, even though, yes, absolutely, there was a time frame. In fact, when I was a Seventh-day Adventist, there was a kind of a college movement, because there's full-on Seventh-day Adventist colleges. Some of them are highly respected, like Loma Linda, as a medical college, and some others. At the time, there was like a college movement on Adventist colleges where like these young people were going around saying, we've discovered this, ancient precept within Adventism, which is kind of funny in itself because, Seventh-day Adventists have only been, first, in comparison to some religions, it's a long time, but it hasn't even been around like 200 years. It's a fairly new denomination in comparison to some others. But within Protestantism, that's not bad, to have 200 years, since Protestantism has only been around since, well, depending on how you want to look at it, but Martin Luther, 17th or what, 16th century. Sorry. Anyway, so they believe in sola scriptura. Now, people think that Adventists don't believe in sola scriptura because you have one of the other. So the two defining aspects of Seventh-day Adventism. One is that they worship on the Jewish Sabbath. Okay, they worship on Saturday, and they celebrate on. And I could get into some more of this in a minute, but they celebrate from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. That's a holy time. It's a time that you go to church and all this crap. The other defining aspect, perhaps, is this belief that in the 19th century, that there's this woman, Ellen G. White is her name, who, in my opinion, it's fact that she was given to fits of epilepsy, which would get confused with moments of prophecy. And Ellen G. White is this woman that is considered a prophetess. Now, she wrote a lot. She wrote a lot of books. It's arguable that she actually, copied and plagiarized a lot of works from her day. But her argument was, and the church's argument is that she was bringing on like these just really, really, ancient primitive Christianity and, primitive God belief concepts back into the church. Okay. And she's really written, some of her books are very popular, like Desire of Ages, which is about the life of Christ. She has a whole series that kind of goes into that. Then, there's steps into Christ. There's a lot. And the thing is that her work, while it is considered inspired in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, if anything she said actually contradicted, kind of whatever they believe the Bible actually says. you can interpret the Bible in a million ways, frankly. But if anything, I mean, to their credit, if they found anything that was contradictory, they would have said, no, okay, that she's wrong. Like that's not the, they see Ellen G. White as a lens within which to look at the Bible through. Not that her work is, on par with the Bible. So they really do believe in sola scriptura. Okay, so they're Protestants. I mean, that's really it. Like there's not a whole lot more to go into with that. They're just straight up Protestants. And look, when I was an Adventist, because, people want to get into some conspiratorial shit. I know a lot of people, I've heard people make claims about the Mormon church. I have never been a Mormon. I can't really speak to that. I don't know. And I'm not, and again, I have friends, I have people that I really respect that are Mormon. So, they could probably say much better than I ever could. But, people talk about, oh, well, the Mormons actually in their temples, they have a golden calf in the back that they worship, and they have all, it's the same thing gets leveled on Seventh-day Adventists. And I can say that unless, it's one of the major general conference churches or something, okay, which, understand the Adventist church has ruling bodies isn't exactly the best term, not even legislative bodies, but they have they have committees, I think is the best term to come up for it. They have committees. The one around the world is called the General Conference. Now, maybe in some weird General Conference church, okay, they do something funky, and I wouldn't know about that. But I've been to a lot of these churches. I've been in every room of these churches because, honestly, I've heard a lot of these claims, and I wanted to fucking see for myself. And I would go there at times where, it's not like anybody just hid this shit or something. Like, it's just not there. These are just very, frankly, simple people, some of them very intelligent, I have to admit. I've been friends with them. I've been friends with, some of the big names in Seventh-day Adventism. Doug Batchelor was a friend. I used to be really, really, even as I was a young person, I was really into it. And of course, I had my bout where I went back into, the church for a little while after I got out of the military and all that. Okay, but there's nothing like that kind of shit going on. There just isn't. There's genuine abuse and other things that are happening. I am sure that happened in every single, every walk of life, Christianity or not. All these terrible things go down, sure. But as far as any odd God or weird ways of worshiping God or any of this shit, no, it just doesn't happen. It's just it really, in so many ways, it's just like going to any other church. It's a little more formal. I mean, it's not a Tridentine Mass or anything like in Catholicism, but it's, it might be a little more formal. They're not so big on having a rock band up on the podium that I know some churches like to do that sort of thing. But no, they just don't. And I'm not saying become an Adventist. For fuck's sake, I'm an atheist. No, it's terrible. I think that Adventism and the, Christianity really overall, puts is a prison for your mind. I'm not arguing for that in any way. I'm just saying, no, there's no crazy funny business going on there that doesn't happen in the rest of the world anyway. Not even remotely close. So, and Ellen G. White's teachings, yeah, they're really big. I guess you could consider this another defining aspect of Adventism, but not really, because not every Seventh-day Adventist does this. They're really big on veganism. Ellen G. White wrote a lot about that. Granted, it was a popular topic at the time. They don't quote unquote believe in drinking caffeine. And so there's that coffee alternative called Roma. Oh, I can't tell you how much of that I've ever had. They're really big on health. They're huge on living a very healthy lifestyle. They're very conservative in their views, in their lifestyle. And they spread that wherever they go. Obviously, I am opposed to that sort of thing. They can practice it all they want, but when they're telling people, when they're trying to treat it as like a holy edict, then, you and I have a problem. Okay. So, but, and, it's like Thomas Jefferson said, the tyranny's against the minds of man. I think conservatism overall in a very real sense is, but certainly, baking in with Christianity and the threat of hell, it gets worse. But anyway, whatever. People are Christian, they're Christian. So now that's another thing though too. That's not that this is unique to Seventh-day Adventists, but they don't believe in hell. They believe in soul sleep. They don't believe that when you die that you end up going to heaven or hell. They believe in what they call an investigative judgment. I mean, there's a million things I could talk about with Seventh-day Adventism that are kind of peculiar or maybe even slightly unique. There's things they're well known for more than others. Like I said, worshiping on Saturday, and Ellen G. White are kind of the two big ones. Veganism. Like I said, not everybody has to be a vegan. They definitely want you to follow Levitical law. Not as strict as Jews. Like, it's not like they say that you have to, that you can't cook chicken and milk or something like that. Those kinds of mitzvot aren't a part of it, but the very particular chapters in Leviticus where it talks about, it's got to chew from the cud and have a cloven hoof and things like that. Those they consider like, you need to do that. Even though I knew Adventists that ate pork and, nobody gave a shit. But anyway, there's a million things that I could talk about, but that's another one that is kind of interesting to them, is that they don't believe in a literal hell. They believe that when you die, your soul sleeps, and of course they quote two or three different chapters or verses within the Bible, particularly like Ecclesiastes 9, where it says the dead know not anything, and all of that. And so that, they think that with the investigative judgment, you won't, and that's a whole other concept in itself that's kind of interesting in how it gets interpreted by Adventists. But anyway, they think that you get judged at the second coming. Okay. And the second coming is, so I think they're what you would call post-millennial. Okay. You have three different types of, would that be eschatology? Exegetical. No, not exegetical. Well, anyway, they have three different. There's three main different concepts within Christianity that have to do with the end times. Okay, but anyway, I'll talk about those in a second. But let's finish up with this whole hell thing. So, hell for them is something like there will be. Satan's just walking the earth. That's their claim. Not that he's in hell, but that he's pretty much walking the earth. Which isn't a crazy concept, because, when you read the book of Job and some other things, it's exactly what he says he's doing. He's walking the earth. He says the earth is his. It's what he offers to Christ, right? Pick your gospel. And so they think that when Christ comes, when the second coming happens, there will be the resurrection of the dead at that point, okay? And at that point, you will be judged whether or not you will perish for eternity, or if you will spend eternity with Christ. That's when that happens. However, they don't think that you will spend, and this is where their interpretation of the book of Revelation gets very interesting. They don't think that you will burn in hell forever. There's the concept in Revelation of the lake of fire. Okay, they think that there will be a lake of fire, and the beast, that being Satan, will be in that for 1,000 years. Okay, which that's that millennium of post-millennial, premillennial, millennial. That he'll be in there for 1,000 years. After that 1,000 years, he will be, Satan will be set loose, along with all of the people that decided to follow Satan instead of Christ. There will be one last battle between Christ and all the quote-unquote bad guys and Satan at the gates of New Jerusalem, which will come down, will be a part of earth after that millennium, after that 1,000 years. And then they will, but obviously Jesus is just going to win. Like the battle's pointless, and Jesus is just going to snuff everybody out, and they're gone. Okay, but that's the thing, they're gone. Like, it's not people getting roasted on pitchforks or anything like that. They'll just be gone. They'll be completely, utterly dead. No souls swimming around or anything. They'll be completely gone. And then everybody that decided to follow Christ, well, they all live in New Jerusalem on the planet Earth forever and ever into eternity. And that's their concept. They don't believe in like a tribulation. Like there's the idea of the tribulation that was made really popular by like Tim LaHaye's work, the Left Behind books, and even the movies and all that. They don't think that there's any kind of like or like a secret. They believe in a tribulation. They don't believe in a secret rapture, a pre-trib, what they call a pre-trib rapture. Believe me, I know it's crazy that these terms even exist. But they believe that, yeah, like everybody's going, there's going to be like this reign of the Antichrist. Everybody's going to have to experience that. Nobody's getting taken up ahead of time. And of course, the second coming will put an end to the reign of the Antichrist. But you're going to have to wait for that second coming. You're not getting off scot-free, and you're probably going to be persecuted, maybe even killed during the reign of the Antichrist if you still follow, Christ's work or Christ's word. If you still follow Christ, so. Yeah, I mean, those are all kind of interesting, especially it's definitely a very unique amalgamation of a lot of big ideas that may not be unique to them, to Adventists within Christianity, but are certainly rare and, not conventional, concepts of Christianity by a long shot. But all of that, when you think you have, I mean, this is what happens with Seventh-day Adventists, when you think you have like this incredible truth and you look at even within people who are supposedly your own kind, Christians, no one else believes this stuff. I mean, yeah, it lends you to thinking, ooh, we're the special people. We're the chosen people. This is the whole world's against us. And I mean, after a fashion, the Bible kind of says that, right? Like in 2 Timothy, it says very clearly, you'll be persecuted for your faith. So the world is actually against you if you're a Christian. That's why, I mean, then that's one of those things where it just always kills me when you hear these televangelists with their prosperity gospel. No, the Bible does not say you're going to live it up. The Bible says you're going to be persecuted. So you're you're in league with the devil, my friend. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, there's so much to talk about with Seventh-day Adventism. It is a fascinating faith. I'm not saying it's a good one. I'm not saying any faith is good. And I will say, as I've said many, many times on Sovereign Tech, I think the real Christians are probably the Catholics. I think that because this is the thing. So I mentioned sola scriptura, right? The idea that Scripture alone is what you're supposed to go by, and that's where you're going to pull all your doctrine from and everything. The Bible doesn't teach sola scriptura. So, in fact, the Bible teaches that no, there's bishops, there's deacons, there's all these other kinds, and it's going to be between Scripture and the church that decides what goes on going forward. And the Catholic Church is absolutely right for constantly pointing out that verse, saying, no, guess what? The church gets to decide things too. It's not just Scripture. And so, yeah, so, sola scriptura, like I said, it's actually an unbiblical concept. So yeah, I kind of have to give it to the church that's been around that has actually been around for about 2,000 years. And that is following in a very real sense exactly what the Bible says can happen, and that would be, in my opinion, the Catholic Church. Now, like I said, I know I have Protestant listeners, I know I have Catholic listeners, I have Mormon listeners, I have all this. I get it. I know that like there's the concept of primitive Christianity, that Catholicism has bastardized Christianity, and that Martin Luther and whoever else, all these other different Protestant denominations, which Protestant just means anything that isn't Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. That a lot of these other, that these denominations were figuring out the real truths that Jesus put down, that Catholicism bastardized or something. Yeah, I get your point. And, you don't need me. I hope you're not looking to me to tell you what to believe as far as how the Bible goes. You go ahead. You think that way. I'm not going to take anything away from you. Okay. But, based upon, kind of outsider looking in, if somebody said, what's the real Christianity? If that was a question asked to me, it wouldn't be Seventh-day Adventists. Though interestingly, my answer would be Catholicism. Interestingly, you can read in Catholic works, various publications, magazines, whatever else, I think maybe even in their encyclopedia. And they will say that if all you wanted to do was follow the Bible, you should become a Seventh-day Adventist. The Catholic Church says that, which is hilarious to me because like Seventh-day Adventists, they teach that the Antichrist is going to be one of the popes. Like the the Adventist Church is totally against Catholicism, which I think there's such an incredible irony in that. But then other way around, Catholics are like, well, yeah, look, if you just want to follow the Bible and you don't want to follow the Bishop of Rome, then just become a Seventh-day Adventist. They're the best at it. I think that's. Oh, I get such a kick out of that. That's so cute. Anyway, yeah. So I was going to get into another subject, one that could be a little more fun. Well, I think that was actually kind of fun. Just don't take Adventists seriously. So I was going to end this off. I actually had somebody ask me about the game TIE Fighter because I've been talking about it quite a bit as late. But I won't get into that. But I do want to just give you a heads up on something happening Star Wars related. And I will be talking. I mean, and this is actually a lot more. This is much bigger than Star Wars. But I'll save that TIE Fighter question maybe for next week or something like that. But in fact, in the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group, we have some interesting things going on with that. But not necessarily TIE Fighter directly. But anyway, the thing I want to tell you about, and I'm going to mention this on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode as well, is that coming up on December 13th, and this is going to be running, I think, from 10 o'clock at night. That'll be the Wednesday, 10 o'clock at night, Eastern time, to like 9 o'clock at night on Thursday, the 14th, that this is going to be running. Okay, so this is just next week. Woo, and you know the 14th, baby. I'm going to be seeing The Last Jedi. But that's kind of what this is about, is Resist the Empire podcast, who has been a Sovereign Tech sponsor in the past, and that I'm just a fan of. I'm just a fan of the podcast. I'm a fan of what Brian and Roger do over there. They're going to be doing like this 24-hour Star Wars-a-thon, and they're going to watch all the movies, including Rogue One. And throughout that time, they're going to be, they're going to be chatting it up, do whatever, and they're doing it all for charity. Okay, they're going to be collecting for the Starlight Children's Foundation, which does tremendous work for so many kids who are sick, unwell, all across the board. I mean, it's amazing. I'm a big fan of what the Starlight Children's Foundation does. And it's so cool to kind of, to have this mixture of charity and Star Wars, I mean, and that's great because Star Wars fans are so passionate, So if you want to check it out, go to resisttheempirepodcast.com. I don't know if I'm going to be able to attend. I'll admit I was invited to be a part of the marathon, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it. If I do, it'll be part of it, and it will probably be early on, but we'll see. But, I don't want to make any promises on that, but I do just want to, I think that this is great work that's going on, and they're doing this again, all for charity, they're hoping to raise like $1,000. I'm sure they can do more. I'm sure they can do much, much more, especially with the Sovereign Tech audience involved. I hope you want to get involved with it. This is really a great cause and a lot of fun doing it, right? I mean, what's more fun than watching all the Star Wars movies, for fuck's sake? Why wouldn't you? So I will be announcing it also on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode this week, as it is coming up on December 13th. Of course, the Prime episode will be a few days before that, but anyway, so go to resisttheempirepodcast.com. You'll see right at the top, it'll say Starlight Children's Foundation. You just click on that, and that'll give you, the info if you want to do it. So far, I think they already have donations coming in, so you can donate now if you want. But I think this is tremendous. Roger Paxton does fantastic work, and I'm a big fan of the podcast. And obviously, like I said, certainly a big fan about helping out kids. And the Starlight Children's Foundation does a phenomenal job of that. So do check that out. And that is it for your Wednesday Q&A this week. I will see you on the other side.